Welcome to the Caregiver Relief Podcast, where we bring you powerful stories and practical insights to support family caregivers and those they care for. I'm your host, Diane Carbo, and a registered nurse. This episode is sponsored by myvitalvault.net, your all-in-one life organizer for aging adults and caregivers. It's designed to help you securely store your essential legal, medical, and emergency information in one easy-to-access place. Because when a crisis hits, being prepared can make all the difference. Join our Caregiver Relief community, a warm, welcoming space where you can connect with other caregivers, ask questions, share stories, and find support from people who truly understand. Visit community.caregiverrelief.com to join now, because caregiving is one of the hardest and most meaningful things you'll ever do, and no one should have to do it alone. And if this episode speaks to you, please take a moment to like, share, or comment. Every click helps us reach more caregivers who need encouragement, resources, and hope. And today we are joined by the remarkable Jo Ann Glim, award-winning author, podcaster, speaker, and stroke survivor. Jo Ann's life changed in an instant when a hemorrhagic stroke left her unable to talk, walk, or even see clearly. But her determination, faith, and the love of those around her led her on her journey not just to recovery, but to a renewed purpose. Through her books, Begotten with Love and Trapped Within, and her work as a peer counselor, Jo Ann has turned her own struggle into hope for others. She also uses her platform to raise awareness about stroke, recovery, and the healing power of connection, including surprising ways music may play a role in recovery. Today, Jo Ann will share her story, her journey, her insights for caregivers, and lessons she's learned about resilience, love, and never giving up. Jo Ann, thank you so much for being here. I'm glad you agreed to do this podcast with me.
I'm looking forward to it. I think it's such a remarkable way to get the word out to not only stroke survivors, but the caregivers, because there is a big question mark, not only between them, but also with the medical professionals.
Absolutely. Now, you've written about your life before stroke in Begotten with Love. Can you take us back to the day everything changed and what happened, and how did you first realize that you were having a stroke?
It actually goes back to when I was 14 years old and my mother had a stroke. She did not survive her stroke. She had a stroke, and 3 days later she was gone. I was 14. She was 51, I believe, at the time. And that affected me a lot. It made me want to go into medicine in one way or form. And it was impossible to do. I had been living in the state of Washington in a little town called Anacortes. It was a small town. I'd known everybody since I was 4 years old. And so it was quite a shock to me to go from living in a small town that was it's actually on an island. And at the time, back in 1958, it was 5,280 people that lived there. And the kids had free range of the island. We all knew each other. When we were old enough, we could ride our bicycles to wherever we wanted to go, because everybody was your mom. And if my mom told me to be home at a certain time, or if there were other mothers that were around and saw me doing something I shouldn't be doing, they would be on the phone and call my mother, and she would know everything before I ever got home. So I never won one of those arguments. But anyway, when she passed away, I had come back to Chicago to live with her sister. Yeah, with her sister and her family. And it was such a difference because we had thousands of kids just in our high school. And my graduating class in Anacortes would have been, I believe, 126. So it was quite a difference. And I was very shy to begin with. So it took me a while to find out who I was and go from there.
I lost my mom at a very early age, not to a stroke, but to cancer. And it has a major impact on all of our lives so much. And so I understand some of what you went through about losing someone you love so profoundly and to a stroke in such a short period of time. That's a tough one. Now, in those first days and weeks, what was the biggest hurdle you faced physically, emotionally, and mentally after you had your stroke? Do you remember any of that time?
I remember very little, but I definitely remember the time when it actually happened. My husband and I had just recently retired about 6 months before and had moved from Chicago down to Florida. And we were looking forward to having a few years of enjoying life and doing whatever we felt like doing. But we also wanted to stay involved because once you're retired, the things that you love can actually start to settle into your life and
Yep.
you can really make progress and do good things with your life. And it feels good to be able to do that. So we had reached a point where we believed it was time to get back to doing something, and because we didn't know a lot about where we were living, and I had worked for 16 years for Kelly Services, but I had also worked at the same time. They had put me into a management role for Kelly Services at Baxter Healthcare. So I worked in human resources in that position. So when we moved down here, I went to Kelly and introduced myself and everything, and I had called them and asked if they had any openings for a day or two, and they did over at Tropicana. So I took a one-day assignment and went over there. It was a gorgeous day. I was really looking forward to going over and working with them. They had me on assignment in marketing, which I absolutely love. And I got up there and everything was going well until one of the managers came out and told me that he didn't have any lunches for 17 people that he was educating. They had a conference going on. And so I told him not to worry about it, that I'd take care of it. So I got everything set up, went over to the restaurant to pick up the sandwiches. They had box lunches for them. And when I went up to pay for it, I didn't feel any differently than I had. But when I went to say, how much do I owe you? It came out sounding like Russian. And the
Yep.
gentleman that was waiting on me just looked at me very strangely. And I felt embarrassed because I thought that he thought I was making fun of him because he had an accent. And so I tried one more time and it still came out the same way. So I just handed him the credit card. We did the exchange. He handed me two of the box lunches, and a couple of the people that worked for him followed me out with the rest of them. And as I was walking to the car, I felt like my legs felt like jello. And I was uncertain of myself. But the thing that was interesting is in my mind, I knew definitely right then and there that I was having a stroke.
Oh, wow.
What I did was I put the sandwiches in the trunk. The others put theirs in there. I knew I wouldn't be able to say thank you, so I just blew them a kiss. And I got in the car. And by this time, I didn't have control over my right arm. My hand would just slide right down into the seat. And no matter whether I told it just through my own will and my own words and my own mind, or if I shouted it out loud, it didn't matter. It wasn't going anywhere. So I got back to Tropicana and took a couple of this box lunches and walked into the reception room and picked up a phone and called my husband. And when I called him, it was coming out all garbled and just very odd. And he was very quiet for a minute. And then he said, "I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong number." And I kept thinking in my mind, I have to think of something that I know that's one word and I can get that out. And so what I did was I just shouted out our anniversary date. And all of a sudden he goes, "What's the matter with you?" And I told him, "I'm sick and meet me at the hospital." And I turned around, I hung up, I turned around and I looked at the car still out in front of Tropicana. It was still on. And I'm looking at the people who are returning from lunch. And I hate golfers. When it happens, no matter where there's an accident, everybody's going to stop and take a look. And I thought, I'm not doing that. So I walked out to the car and I realized that the car was only about maybe a mile, if that, not even, maybe half a mile away from where Tropicana's offices were. And I'm so sorry about that. I'm so sorry about that. I wasn't expecting my phone to ring. Anyway, Diane, if you don't mind, I'm going to start that sentence over.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. I just was not expecting my phone to ring.
File.
Linda, I need to call you back. I'm right in the middle of the meeting. Okay, bye. I'm sorry about
That's okay. Start over.
that. So anyway, I saw my car still waiting out in front of Tropicana. The engine was still going. People were coming in from the lunch break. And because I was sick and I had no idea what was going to happen, except if I had called 911, we would have had an emergency situation right in the middle of the reception room. And I hate golfers, and I wasn't going to put up with that. But I still felt good enough that I believed that I could drive myself to the hospital. So I got in my car, and I did. I drove over there. I parked in a parking spot for an ambulance because there were no other parking spots. When I went to get out of the car, the gentleman who watches the parking lot was on his little, I want to say go-kart, and that's not right. It's the golf cart, on his little golf cart in his uniform, and he came over. But by this time, I'm standing, pressing up against the window on my car. My arm is sloped over, it looks like a ski slope. I didn't realize, but by that time, my mouth was beginning to droop. And when he came up, he looked at me and he said, "Lady, you can't park here." And I said, "I think I'm having a stroke." Well, he looked at me, realized it was true, never said anything like, "Let me help you." He just said to me and he said, "Okay, I'll keep an eye on your car, don't worry about it," and drove off. And so I'm looking at him. I walked the 15 steps to the front door, and when they opened, it got that air in it, so it made that whoosh sound. So you would think somebody would turn around to see who's coming in, but nobody did. So I stood right in the middle of there, and I just yelled out as best I could, "I think I'm having a stroke." And I no sooner said that, and the nurse turned around and looked at me and said, "She walked in here?" And just at that moment, somebody came behind and put their arms under mine, and I collapsed. And that's the only thing I remember.
I have a friend who was in her mid to late 80s. Her name was Charlotte. She's no longer with us, but Charlotte would have TIAs or trans ischemic attacks. And every time she'd call 911, because she lived alone, by the time they got there, they had resolved and nobody does anything. And people don't understand that a TIA they call it a mini stroke, is a precursor to a bigger stroke at some time in your life. So you really want to address and manage yourself, your health, so that maybe you won't have the bigger stroke. But I literally she drove a Ford 150 big truck. She's in Pennsylvania in the country, and she's driving. We're going out to lunch. We come back from lunch, and as she's talking to me, she starts to have slurred speech. And just like you, it started to be garbly goop. You couldn't understand it. But knowing her health history, and I'm a nurse, I just said, pull over right away. And because she was the one that was driving this monstrosity of a truck, I said, pull over right away. And I pushed her over and got in her side and took her right to the ER. And that was the first time that they were absolutely able to see that she had a mini stroke. And that shocked me, because they can be very transient. 1 minute you're feeling bad, and the next minute you're having a stroke. And then all of a sudden it's resolved again. And I guess during those periods, people don't always realize what's happening to them when it's occurring. I don't know. I've not had a stroke, but I've had others say they just can't remember a lot.
My daughter just passed away about a year and a half ago she had a series of strokes. But maybe 4 or 5 years before that, she would have a mini stroke here and there. Mm-hmm. For her, what she would do is, when she had them, you're right, I think they don't understand how serious it is, because you don't have the pain.
Yep.
It's there, and they do something, and it's gone. And most of us feel like if you get an aspirin or you get something, other type of medication, it makes it go away. You feel like Wonder Woman or Superman or somebody, because you fought it, you got rid of it. And so you don't yourself take it as seriously as you should.
Exactly. And that's why I really appreciate you bringing this topic to light, because so many people poo-poo or dismiss or discount even that what they're feeling or what their family member's seeing resolves. Oh, they're fine and it's not going to happen again. But they don't understand that it can happen. Charlotte had 10 episodes over a period of a few years. And it was that one that I was with her that observed it and took her right to the ER, that she didn't have to wait for an ambulance. She didn't have to wait to be able to call. And we actually we got her to the ER, where they diagnosed her and started to work on teaching her about preventing a stroke in the future, because she was still a bad diabetic. She'd eat extra sugar and take more insulin. She didn't eat right. She didn't exercise. She didn't do anything to make a lifestyle changes to prevent future strokes. And that was sad for me, because I really loved her. But you can't make people take care of themselves if they don't see what.
A lot of times too, and I shouldn't say this to point fingers at anybody, but a lot of times in people that in order to get around, they become very creative. My mother-in-law was one that did this. She was a diabetic. And I remember when we would go out to breakfast for her, if it was a special breakfast or something, she always liked to have a Belgian waffle. That was her favorite. And her way of getting around things was because she had insulin with her. She said if she took an extra shot of insulin, she could eat that Belgian waffle.
Exactly.
And everything would be okay.
Yeah.
So we've learned how to fool ourselves over the years, and all of us included. We all have our little quirks in life, and we're not ready or willing to give them up.
Exactly. I was in my 20s and late 20s when my mother-in-law at the time took retirement. They were much older. Their son that I married was a change of life baby, and he was the youngest of four. When Mrs. Brockvogel, actually retired, she was head of a lab, a bacteriology lab. She was a brilliant woman, graduated magna cum laude from the University of Chicago, very impressive female, very bright, loved to cook, loved to eat, and had high blood pressure her whole life and never followed the rules. So they finally get to a point where they live in Indiana, and they found this house on a lake. Now, there aren't many homes on a lake in Indiana. Indiana doesn't have a lot of lakes, but this was a man-made one. And they were so excited to start their retirement. And as I'm helping them move in, I have my mother-in-law sitting reading a book by the window overlooking the lake, and she's noticing how beautiful it is. And while she's reading, I'm busy hauling in boxes and unpacking. And she's sitting there and she goes, "Diane, there's something wrong with me." I said, "What's the matter?" She goes, "I can't read." And that was one of the first strokes that she had. Again, it was a mini stroke, a TIA. But when we took her to the hospital right away, because I wanted her to understand the serious nature of this, even if it did resolve. But as brilliant as she was, she did what she wanted to do. She cooked up a storm, amazing gourmet food all the time, and she ate it. And we all were supposed to eat it. And she lived life on her terms, but she never got to enjoy that lake house. They were in there a short period of time when she continued to cook. It was months later, she had a massive stroke and ended up in a nursing home, which broke our hearts. So I understand that I want people to understand that if you're seeing the symptoms of a stroke, like high blood pressure, one of the things is strokes are preventable. Most of them are. There are some where you're going to have a weakness, genetic weakness, but they are preventable. I'd like to ask you, now you witnessed losing your mother and your daughter to strokes, and I'm sure that has played some importance on your recovery. How did those experiences influence your mindset today?
It's interesting you should say that. But before we get to that point, there is something I do want to say about the first part of when I had my stroke. With me driving in the condition that I was in, and this is a part of just who I am, when I'm in situations, especially working for 16 years for Kelly, you never knew what you were going to walk into and have to resolve. So I would always do, okay, if this happens, we go to plan A. If this happens, we go to plan B. So I always had 2 or 3 different thoughts in my mind when I would do something. Or if I was in a situation where I saw someone who was ill or had been hurt or something, even though I'm not a medical person, but if I knew I was the only one there to help this person until the medical professionals got there, I would do the same thing, go through the ABC.
Yep.
So when this happened to me, I said to myself, all right, I still feel strong enough. My mind is clear. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I knew the way the road was laid out, and it wasn't that far for the whole journey. It was a matter of blocks for both ways. And both of them had a lot of open field. So I felt if anything progressed further, I could just swing the car up over the sidewalk onto the field and be done with it until somebody found me. But I would like to say, never trust somebody with an addled mind. And that's what I had at that time. And if you happen to be in the throes of a stroke or you're not feeling well enough to drive, don't drive. It's not a smart thing to do. Ask for help. Lay down on the ground if you have to. They'll get somebody to you very quickly if you're on the sidewalk. Do something that's intelligent, not because you think you're so smart. Just know there are people out there that will help you. And that first hour is so critical for you.
It is. It is absolutely critical. And I have to jump in there and say that there are many women and men out there that are fiercely independent, and they would rather die than have someone see them in a weakened state, whether it's a stroke or something. And I can see people making themselves do things, making a decision based on emotion and not logic, and having dire consequences. I know when Charlotte had her stroke while she was driving, I'm like, oh, hell no. You're not. She said she could flirt. She was trying to tell me she could still drive. And I'm like, hell no, you're not driving. I'm sorry. And I made her push across the seat of the thing and said, I'm getting my butt in there and I'm driving, because there's what happens if something worse happens to you. I said, there don't need to be two victims of a car accident. And she did. She gave in. This is a really good point, that you shouldn't drive. You should try to get attention and understand that first hour is so important. If you can, dial 911. If you can't, cause a scene, lay on the ground. People are going to come and find you. Whatever it takes to get the attention to get to an emergency room as soon as possible. So let's get back to losing your mother and your daughter to strokes, and how that's has influenced your mindset.
When I lost my mother, there was a point in time that I was very angry at God. And I think there's so many emotions that family goes through. And back in like 1958, it was a totally different place to live. Back during that period of time, you did not talk about emotions. This was
That's
life.
true.
This is the way it goes. That's it.
Yep.
I had never been, except I had my tonsils out when I was 7. I'd never been in a hospital, never saw anybody that was critically ill. And when my mother passed away, our pastor came over. Now, my second grade teacher was in the room next to my mother, and I was terrified of her. She wasn't mean, but she was very stern, and there wasn't one person, even at this age, if all of my classmates and I were in the same room and somebody shouted out, Mrs. Caldwell, we would all go, ooh. None of us would dare to say a word in her.
Yep.
And so when I walked into the hallway and I saw Mrs. Caldwell in the room right across the way from my mother's, She said, Joni, come here. And I'm like, when do you see my mom? But I did. I went in there. She was so kind and so gentle and so loving. And
Wow.
who knew how difficult this whole situation was? She said, if you need me, you come in here. And I just was so taken by that. And so I went in and I saw my mother just briefly, and she was sleeping at the time. Later that evening, my best friend, she had invited me to go with her and to their church, and the kids were having a meeting. So they prayed for my mother, and because I was 14, I didn't drive. My aunt and my grandparents lived with us, but they didn't drive, and neither did my mom. So the kids' parents drove me to the hospital. When I got in there, my mother was awake. She wasn't able to open her eyes, but she grabbed my hand and just held it so tightly. Oh, it hurt. I really thought she was going to break my fingers.
Oh.
But we talked for a while. I told her I loved her, and I saw a tear kind of trickle from the side of her face. And I told her I'd be back the next day, that there were people waiting to take me home. And I left. And that was the last time I'd seen her, when she was still alert herself. So the next day when I went back, it's the day that she passed away. And after she did, and Mrs. Caldo came out there and just held me while all of this was going on. Well, when our pastor got there, he grabbed me by the shoulders and pulled me into her room. And he put me so that my face was facing hers. They had not closed her eyes yet. She had just passed away. And he said to me, she's dead now. She's not here anymore. And he pulled me away from her and out into the hallway. And that was the only words of comfort I'd received from that man.
Oh.
So that left me feeling really angry at him, angry at God. How can you take the mother of a 14-year-old child? And it was very difficult. I held on to that anger until I got married and had a baby of my own. And then all of a sudden, I started to have a yo-yo relationship with God, where when things were good in my life, yay, we were a team. When things were falling apart, it's okay, God, I got it. I'll take it from here. And then things would really fall apart. But it went back and forth like that for a while. And then I met a beautiful man that I married. I'd been married once before, and we went through a divorce. I stayed single for about 5 years, and then I married this wonderful man. And we had 47 years of marriage before he passed away.
Oh, wow. That's impressive.
Yeah, it was good. It was really good. But so as our time together continued, my faith also continued to grow and become stronger, even through the hard parts. And the reason I'm mentioning all this is because when my daughter passed away, and it was funny because she wasn't involved in the church as she was older. And so every time we would have a phone conversation or anything, I would always say to her, very last thing I would say is, okay, Tammy, I love you. Go to church. It was the only conversation we had. But I'll be darned if she didn't. She found the church that she absolutely loved. And we were in Florida. She lived up in Chicago at the time. She asked my husband to be her sponsor. And he had a beautiful singing voice, and he sang for her when she joined the church. And just really, faith was so strong. She didn't talk about it a lot, but she used it in her life. And it was really beautiful to watch her experience that. Now, when she passed away, she had come down here. My husband had already passed away. She had come down to visit. And this is about 2 years after Bill had passed away. She came down here to visit. And while she was here, she had a stroke. And she ended up in the hospital more than once, on 3 different occasions. In fact, one of those times, because she went to the situation where they brought her back, she was doing good. And on one of these occasions, she and I decided to go out and buy some pajamas, because at Christmas time, Bill's family decided that we were all wearing pajamas on Christmas Eve. We went out to get these pajamas to wear and stuff. And as we were in the store, we didn't walk far to the store or anything. And she said, "Mom, I'm going to sit down. I'm tired." And I said, "That's fine." And I went a little further into the store. And so I couldn't see over the stacks of clothing to see who said this. But I heard some woman say very loudly to my daughter, because I knew where she was sitting, "What's your name?" And Tammy told her. And there was a little more of a conversation, but it was a little more quiet. And so by the time I got up to the front, this woman was gone. And Tammy was sitting there laughing. And she listened and she goes, "Oh, are you in trouble?" And I went, "Why?" She said, "That was one of the nurses from the hospital. I guess I'm supposed to be home." We got our pajamas and left right away. And we did go on Christmas Eve. We did go because it was a family thing not far, and it just was nice. It was comforting to be there. And we wore our pajamas and just had a really good time. But she ended up 3 different times in the hospital, and the 3rd time she did not come home. She passed away.
We have 2 things in common. We both lost our moms at young ages, and we both lost a child, an adult child. My son was not from a stroke. My son had a severe pain condition and completed suicide. But the loss, it just has definitely affected and impacted my thoughts on death and dying. I'm a lot more open about talking about it because of the situation that I dealt with my father when my mom was going through treatment for cancer. Jo Ann, you became a peer counselor for other stroke survivors. What motivated you to step into that role, and what do you share with people in those first overwhelming days?
When I was in the rehab center, the doctors and the therapists came in almost every day just to talk to me about what they're offering to me and if it was helping and what else I felt like I needed. And they shared with me that back at that time, which was, I think, 1997, was when I had my stroke. And back then, most of the training that they received was for physical. And they never realized all the other symptoms and things, the process that you have to go through in order to find who you are now. So as we had our conversations and stuff, it set a seed in my mind, and that's when I started to think about writing about what was happening to me, and without knowing how it was going to end, to keep doing it until we had found a place that people may be able to say, "Oh my gosh, that's what I'm going through." and then see certain hints or thoughts and stuff that I may have had that may help them in their process of healing.
So how does telling your story help you heal? It's obviously helping others because it's giving them hope and a sense of they're not alone in their suffering in recovery.
I think the way it's helping me is to help me to continue to realize we're not alone. We're not the only one that's had a stroke. Not to be negative towards insurance, but to share something that seems to continue to happen. And that's when you have a stroke, it seems like you have a certain amount of insurance, and then they deem that you're well enough to go home. You don't need their help anymore. And they may give you a little more help as far as physical therapy for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and then you're done with that. So a lot of times for stroke survivors, we feel that's it, and we don't know how to do things. We might repeat some of the therapy that we learned. Especially, I used to do that when I was cooking dinner. I'd have the radio on to a song that I liked, and I'd be kicking my heels backwards or doing some steps or something. Enough for that song, and that was it. And that wasn't really giving me what I needed to do. So somewhere along the way, if you want to really be tough on yourself, you have to begin to look at yourself as like an Olympian and really push yourself to do the best you can. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying no pain, no gain, because that's the furthest thing from my mind, because that can cause more harm or disillusionment than anything. But what I'm saying is, if you're having difficulty with your hand, if your hand is curved up so that you can't get your fingers down straight, be kind to yourself. Go and put a washcloth or a dishcloth in the microwave for, I'm not sure if it's 30 seconds or a minute. It's not very long. And it will warm it up. Roll it up. Put it in your hand so that your fingers aren't quite as clenched as they are when you have nothing there. And do that for maybe an hour. And then the next night, do the same thing. And you'll start to feel an ease in your fingers from doing that. And then start doing things like taking one finger at a time and just rubbing it from the bottom where it joins the hand all the way up to the tip of the finger, because it's allowing more blood to flow into your fingers and it's helping to soften it. So
people don't realize that after a stroke, it's ongoing rehabilitation for the rest of your life. They don't realize that if you stop walking or exercising, you're going to lose your ability, just like you would if you were naturally aging. But with a stroke survivor, if they have dysarthria, which is difficulty with speech, then they need to continue to work their mouth muscles, their tongue muscles, and do the swallowing exercises on a regular basis so that they maintain that base level, because if they decline, they may not get it back again. And I think that's one of the things that people don't realize about after a stroke. It's like your therapy's not done. We have a public health crisis right now in the country where they're discharging. Medicare reimbursement is so low for therapies right now. When you go into a skilled facility or acute rehab, the facilities get a higher level of reimbursement for not providing care. And that's very disconcerting. I just had a patient of one of my clients that he was in the hospital he has MS, but it's in remission. He's doing very well. He's a very unstable diabetic, and he just went in because he couldn't walk. He literally couldn't walk, and they didn't know what it was. So he had back surgery. They sent him home in 12 days. He was home less than an hour, and we had to send him back because when his wife transferred him to the toilet, she fell, and he had to go back in to have surgery again on his back. And what I'm seeing is that rehab is not being provided to patients that need it on a regular basis. And that's why I'm doing a series on stroke awareness, is stroke recovery, because there are things now that are happening because the therapies aren't where we as a culture are now expected by our government to cost share in our care. That means that the rich will pay for whatever it is they need because the high copays or whatever deductibles, they'll be able to meet them. The middle class will do like they've always done. They will take out second mortgages, reverse mortgages, whatever it is to get the treatment. And the poor and the elderly with poor funds are going to do without. So I'm really concerned about stroke recovery. And I'm reading we're having hybrid therapies where it will be done online. The therapy will be done with the patient that needs the therapy and their family caregiver being directed to do the session, the physical therapy, speech therapy, or OT session under the direction of a physical therapist via online. And I'm like, oh my gosh, now they have exoskeletons that you put on your hand to exercise your hand regularly. There are all these products coming out to help us recover because our healthcare system's very broken and people aren't getting the care they need at home. In fact, this gentleman with the MS and the back surgery, he was literally discharged after 2 weeks in rehab, acute rehab, and he had a decubitus on his heel that the facility didn't document or the nursing staff never looked for and noted. And as an old rehab nurse, I can tell you right now, that just made me so angry because he could lose his foot. We don't know yet. We're still dealing with that. But how do you do that if you're getting people up and you're taking them to therapies and you're doing things? They're leaving them stay in bed, which is really frustrating to me. And I'm sure you hear this. Now, you have a podcast, Stroke Survivor Stories Plus, and it brings together voices from the stroke community. What's been one of the most memorable moments from those conversations?
Oh, my goodness. I think one of the ones that I remember the most is a woman she's a beautiful woman and she's so smart. But her health is really, how do I put it? It's fragile. Just because what happened with her, I've not talked to her about sharing this, but I think it's all right. She had been in a car accident. She shared this on our story when I did an interview with her. She had been in a car accident that had really crushed her pretty bad. And afterwards, she had a stroke. It was from everything that had happened, but it hadn't happened at the time of the stroke, I think is what I'm trying to say. She had a podcast as well, and she was doing physical things at that time. Now, she did not do anything. She had her stroke and did nothing as far as physicality for 9 years.
Oh, my.
And when she found out, because right now, why is that word escaping me? It's not coming to me. Anyway, they do things repetitively nowadays. And when she started to do some of the things that had been taught to her, she started to get movement back in her hand. And
Oh, wow.
after all those years, it's clumsy, but she's capable of picking things up in her hand, which is a big hooray. And there are a lot of podcasts that are on there right now for stroke survivors. And a lot of them are being done either by physical therapists or by stroke survivors themselves, showing you how they did something and how it helped them. And they have a pretty big following.
We need that because strokes are absolutely, the majority of them are preventable, but people don't realize that. So the more we have about stroke awareness, the more we talk about how TIAs are a signal to a future stroke. Don't dismiss them and don't think that just because the symptoms that you are experiencing go away and you think you're back to normal, you're not at baseline. You won't be. You're just going to keep having these until it gets to a dangerous level, and you may never come back from it. Some people never come back home after having a massive stroke. So it's really important that we teach people that eating right, exercising, making healthy lifestyle choices can delay or prevent or even help you during your recovery so that you can get to a higher level of functioning than you did after your stroke. And it's possible. I've seen it many times. You were saying that you were trapped from within and you couldn't physically or emotionally speak. So what message do you want to leave with people today about, from your perspective, what they misunderstand about stroke recovery and how they can better support their loved ones?
I would say never give up. And that's a saying that we all say online. Go in and take a look at some of the stroke groups that are on there. They've got some really good ones. But there was a couple of things that I was thinking about before we did this show that I wanted to make sure that caregivers knew about stroke survivors. One of the first things after a stroke, after the trauma portion of it, is more or less, see, I'm having an aphagic moment myself. When it's calmed down, when the trauma is calm, but you're still recovering in the first throes of the recovering stages of it. The things that we look for without even realizing is kindness, love, patience. Because at that time, it's hard for us to put a thought together. If you ask us a concept about something, I would imagine most stroke patients can't give it to you. One of the other things, especially for people who are caregivers or friends who are visiting or friends that have gone out with you and stuff, this was a big pet peeve with me when I was in a wheelchair. Do not move my chair without my permission.
Amen.
It would be the same as if I had walked up to somebody, put my hands on their shoulders, and moved them where I wanted them to go. First off, it's scary because you don't know who's behind you. Most of us don't have the flexibility to turn and look to see who it is. So you have to be very careful with that.
I'm going to jump in here and say that to the family caregivers that are providing care to someone with a stroke, patience is absolutely necessary. I know people that in acute rehab, which is what I did, and then I did home care for years. I can tell you that one of the things I noticed is family caregivers want to hurry up and help them get dressed, help them do everything. And that is the wrong approach. You want a person post-stroke or any injury or illness or disability to do as much as they can for themselves. Yes, it's painfully slow to sit there and watch them put a shirt on, or they should be able to ask you for help. And I've had people scream at me, "Don't just stand there, you lazy bum. Get me dressed." And then I'm saying, you do what you can, and then you tell me what you need to do, because that just makes it so that they have an opportunity to increase their independence and maybe reach a higher level of independence. But patience is a virtue. I know many, they don't understand about the assistive devices that can be used, like when you're watching somebody eat and they're shaking and they're not getting the food to their mouth. There are special spoons, special tools, and even special plates to help a person eat by themselves. Now, I know that the family caregiver, so they say, "Oh, but it's so painful to watch." You know what? Until somebody asks you for help, you need to allow them to eat whatever they can on their own. It gives them a sense of well-being and their self-esteem and dignity. And whether you may look at the food and see the shaking and see it as undignified, I see it as a person trying to do the best they can with what they have to work with. And that's the resilience that keeps people going and giving them the hope that they can get to a higher level of functioning when you talk about never giving up. And that is the most important point that I would tell any person that's in rehab that post-stroke is never give up, no matter how far post-stroke you are. There's so many things you can do and find things to enjoy your life.
Absolutely. When you were talking about that, I was thinking, you not only are trying to get the food to your mouth, so you're working your mouth, you're working your hand, you're working your fingers, you're working your shoulders. Those are all exercises. You don't have to go to the gym. You don't have to put on a pair of those tight pants. You wear your sweats or whatever you want and just work so that it feels good. The people that I really looked up to when I was first learning everything myself were kids that were anywhere from 6 months old to about maybe 8. Because they would do things. I remember this one little boy, he got in so much trouble. We were over at Walmart, and he happened to climb up on a couple of the shelves. There wasn't any product on there. He just stepped on it and climbed up, grabbed a hold of the bar, and has his other hand out. Thinks he's done something really great. And his mom turned around and yelled at him, "Get down from there, Bert. No, you can't do that." And I'm sitting back there going, "You go." He had his lungs going, his legs going, and it just made me realize there's so many things when you stop to think of what we're going through. It's like we're going through grief. It truly is. When you stop to think of it and you watch the progression, it's just like following Elizabeth Kubler-Ross with the progressions of grief. And that's one thing when I was in the rehab center that they didn't bring it to my attention, but that's where I really discovered it. And there was a woman, because you struggle with, am I always going to be like this? And you're trying so hard to get back to who you were. And when you think of the creativity of children, they haven't been taught that, okay, if you know that this is what you want to do, then you're locked into it for the rest of your life. They haven't figured that out. Nobody's taught them that's what they want to do. They're taught to try this. Maybe this will be a little better. Or because they grow and they're taller and stronger, they can do it a little bit differently. And what we're doing when we're trying to come back is we're railing against being creative. And one of the things that I think is very important is to allow the stroke survivor to think of things that they enjoy doing. For example, I love to garden. Well, my hand wasn't strong enough to hold on to a tool or do anything like plant something. But my husband went out and bought me some tools that were battery operated. I couldn't use them for long, but I couldn't use them for long because I didn't have a lot of energy anyway. And that's another thing for us, for stroke survivors. We need to be kinder and more gentle with ourselves. And for caregivers to understand when we say we're tired, we actually need that sleep. That's a part of the healing process. So don't expect one of us to just get up and do it because we didn't sleep well the night before. We don't have the ability to do that right now.
And that's especially with a person that's aging with a stroke. I haven't had a stroke, but I can tell you I live with chronic pain, so I don't sleep well either. And people look at you. The problem I saw with my son who had a severe pain condition and people with strokes, you can't always see their disability. They may walk fine or just have a light limp, but it's their speech that's not right, or their swallowing's not right, or they have neglect on one side or weakness on one side. People they just look at you and don't see anything out of sorts with you. So they can be very judgmental about what you're doing, and people can be insensitive and judgmental, and you just have to tell them. I tell people, just mind your own business. But to the survivors out there, I used to tell my patients with dementia, and I do this for my stroke patients too, have little cards made up, especially if you have dysarthria, a problem with speech. Just make a card up and say, hey, I'm a stroke survivor. Be patient with me. I can't talk. Things are processing slower. And give that out to them when they're yelling at you. Embarrass them for being such idiots. Because we have an uncaring culture out there. And I have cared for many young people with strokes. People don't understand that strokes don't happen just in the aging adults. They can happen at very young ages.
That's right. And the one that seems to be growing the fastest right now was in the 30s. And that's alarming. That should be looked at to figure out why.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah, we were talking a little earlier. I feel like we're bouncing all over, but these are all things that I think people would love to know about.
Yes.
When we were talking about being creative about things, one of the things that I did, because I was having trouble with my balance, I still do, and with just walking in general. And I do like to dance. And so what I did was I thought about it, and my sister-in-law and I decided that we wanted to learn how to line dance. And so we did. We went over. Now at that time, I think for the first couple, I took a cane with me because I didn't know what I was going to walk into. And I wasn't strong enough to get up and actually dance on the line with everybody. But I would sit back at my chair, and as I sat there, I would go through the motions with my feet.
Yes.
And so then when I finally worked up my courage and felt like I could do it, I'd get at the end of a line and do as much as I could. And then I'd sit down when I either was getting confused or if I was tired. And then eventually the teacher saw what I was doing and stuff, and came over and talked to us, and we told her what was going on. Then what she would do was when they had a new dance, she'd grab my arm and she'd go, okay, Jo Ann, we're going to do this one. And so she'd get me up there, and the two of us, she'd hold on to my arm, and we would dance together. And just from that motion and from having someone hold on to me, it made all the difference in the world. And I was able to move with motion like you're supposed to. And then after that, I would go sit down and everybody would do the first song and stuff. And I'd either get up and join them or not. And I got to a point where I could dance on my own. But the neuroplasticity is the big buzzword that I hear a lot in the last 2 years. And you see so many people just from trying over and over again.
Mhm.
And if you look at that 3-year-old or that 6-year-old, they'll try it around people, and if people laugh at them, they might go in their room and practice a little bit and then come out and try it again. But that's what they do. They're repetitive until they perfect it. And that's what we have to do when we want to try to get better than where we are right now.
What I love about you, Jo Ann, and I have to say this to my listeners, you have to have courage. I'm at an age where I don't care what people think of me and what their response to me is. I was never that way when I was younger. But because I have issues right now with my ability to, I also have balance issues. And they're not bad, but they're going to be bad with my chronic pain. So I'm addressing all my knees and stuff are going. But you have to have the courage to just get out of your comfort zone and do something. And look, the reward for you was more socialization and the ability to dance. That's amazing. And those are the types of tips that the caregivers absolutely need to encourage their survivor, the family member that's a stroke survivor, to keep going and never give up. Jo Ann, how do people find you on your podcast?
We are on YouTube, and it's under my name, or you can find it under Stroke Survivor Stories Plus.
I'll put a link to your information on the bottom of the page after we put up the podcast. Jo Ann, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it. I think that we have a lot of people that are going to that need this information. And I'm going to do this, share it during Stroke Awareness Month, but every month needs to be Stroke Awareness Month. So thank you for your time, Jo Ann.
Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed being with you.
To my family caregivers out there, you are the most important part of the caregiving equation. Without you, it all falls apart. So learn to be gentle with yourself. Practice self-care every day because you are worth it.